Hey people, voice talking to you. Today, we are taking a look at Survive the Nights. Survive the Nights is a new open world zombie horde survival sandbox with integrated multiplayer and a really unique take on base building and defense. This is a title I've been keeping an eye on for a while now, and I'll admit I wasn't particularly impressed the first time I played through it. But since this is an early access title and should be changing all the time, I figured I'd dive back in and give it another chance to see what it has going for it. Before we get started though, you know I have to do my shill. If you'd like to check this game out for yourself, or support the developer so they can improve the game further, there'll be a link for you down in the description where you can also find a link to my Twitch channel if you'd like to come and hang out with me live. I play all of the games you see here on stream before I make my review videos, so come say hi. It'd be nice to see some new faces. Also, you'll have to forgive the drop in quality. I'm working with an old laptop since my PC's power supply crapped itself as soon as I got back from vacation, and I'm still waiting on a replacement. With that done, let's get into the game. There isn't really much of a story to Survive the Nights, other than you barely escaped with your life, you lost all your stuff, and now you're injured in an abandoned cabin and need to prepare for the approaching horde. Now that's all pretty standard stuff as far as zombie survival games go, but since this one is essentially a sandbox, that's perfectly fine. Let's start with the sandbox elements then. When you start up the game, you'll be able to choose from a bunch of multiplayer servers, or you can host your own. Then you can download or edit a bunch of different presets that will set the rules and scenario of the world you'll be surviving in. Now, it's important to note that these scenarios won't drastically change gameplay or add new maps or assets of any kind. Effectively, these are just difficulty and rule presets that dictate the spawn rates of loot and zombies, and change things like damage values and how frequently hordes will attack. I've mentioned hordes a couple of times now, and after playing the game, it's quite obvious that the horde mechanic is what gives this title its identity. Much like 7 Days to Die, the main goal of this game is to build up and fortify a base, so you can outlast and survive the hordes of zombies that'll come banging at your doors every few nights, hence the title. Preparing for these hordes is a serious matter, and the time constraint for setting up a base before sundown adds a layer of anxiety that keeps the player moving. Because, let me tell you, once night falls, and you know the horde is coming for you, this game turns into an absolute horror show. Oh, that's scary. Oh, that is scary. Oh, jeez. Yeah. Once you're trapped inside and the horde is banging on your walls, the distant ambiance of screaming zombies and the flickering lights, ooh, it's just perfect. Frankly, the ambiance, the sound, the anxiety, the stress, the atmosphere of it all is really fantastic. If there's one thing that the developers did absolutely right, it was that. Horde nights are terrifying. At first. Now, I'll talk about why the hordes become less scary in a little while. First, let's focus on the positives. Let's touch on how you prepare for these hordes. So as I mentioned, the purpose of this game is to build up and fortify a base to protect yourself from these hordes. So to survive, you either need to lock yourself in and make it hard for the zombies to find you until they pass over, or you need to build up enough defenses so that you can actually take the horde out yourself to kill all the zombies in it. Now, the latter of these is both the more fun option and the more rewarding, as experience rewards you with new crafting abilities and other things that will help you out in the future. So, how does one prepare for a horde? Well, first of all, you'll need materials and weapons. Borrowing another mechanic from 7 Days to Die, you don't have to collect all of your materials from nature. You can actually deconstruct old furniture, random junk, and piles of crap laying around. Albeit you can do this in like a split second with your bare hands rather than needing tools to chop them apart. Of course, once you have some tools, you can also chop down some trees with this really neat positional damage system that allows you to influence what direction the tree will fall, and it actually makes you chop the fallen tree into usable logs before processing them into wood. Additionally, you can also use tree stumps as a flat working surface to speed up crafting times, which is a neat little feature. I do want to mention while I'm on the subject that I really like the visual style of the inventory and the crafting menu. It's this little notebook that your character carries around and you can move it anywhere on the screen. However, I will also say that the inventory and crafting menus, as neat as they are, really suck. The inventory portion isn't terrible, but without many icons, it can be hard to find what you want at a glance, and the weight of items and your total weight aren't super obvious, especially when you're picking up lots of stuff at the same time. The crafting menu, however, is far worse, though. To craft something, you have to find the proper drop-down menu for it, which means you need to guess which category it's in, and that is a challenge all by itself. Now, you'd think planks might be in the resource section, and a canteen might be in the tools section. Wrong. Canteens are in the resource section, with the nails, which are not in the building section, with the planks that they are used to attach. A particularly bad example is the spiked barricade, which is neither in the trap nor the building section, but is instead in the blueprints section. I understand these categories aren't technically incorrect, but you don't want a bunch of vaguely similar folders where the item a player wants could technically be in several of them. You also want items that are used together to be found together. Anyway, assuming that you find the object that you want to craft, you then have to use the context menu to craft it. No, you cannot craft it by double-clicking on it. No, you cannot queue up several of them to craft at the same time. And no, you cannot even craft it from that object's recipe page, for some reason. Once you've got yourself a hammer and wrangled the crafting menu enough to build yourself some materials, you can start fortifying your base. Now, your base can be, frankly, wherever you want it to be. If you want to just stand in the open and get mauled to death by zombies, that's one decision. But frankly, it's better to choose a standing building. So there's lots of houses here and there, and as long as you can set your sleeping bag down in there, you can claim it as a base. Of course, you want to have some sort of defensive strategy in mind, so a house with minimal doors and windows that you can board up is a good one. If you find a shack on the side of the road and say all I need is a front door, it can be that. If you find a movie theater, that can be your base too. Hardware store? Yep. Gun shop? Yep. Playground? Well, maybe not. A campground, though, that's a solid choice. We also found a lot of little container forts and other neat little structures that you could set up in if you wanted to, like a shack in the middle of a swamp, or a little camping structure up on stilts that's really just a bathroom and some fire barrels nearby. I was partial to a drive-in movie theater that we found with an upstairs projector structure that I built my base in. Fortifying your base is a process mostly of boarding up doors and windows. You can also add locks and a couple of other things to doors to make them a bit more secure once you have the tools and the skill levels for it. You can also put down a few different traps and things like that. And this all uses a dynamic building system that allows players to put planks just about wherever they want on the windows and doors. Of course, you can only put down so many on one side, but you can actually double up those defenses and put boards on both sides of a window. I don't know whether they intended for us to do this or not, but to make it twice as secure. There's also different kinds of planks once you've leveled up more and can refine your materials more to make it sturdier and to generally sort of increase the amount of time it takes for zombies to break through. This is all very reminiscent of 7 Days to Die, the whole building up your base and defending it from hordes of zombies, and it hits the same notes as that game in all the right ways. However, it's also where that creativity aspect sort of ends and where the game starts to fail the ways that 7 Days to Die succeeded. For example, you have to use those designated defense points. You can set up your traps and stuff wherever you want, sure, but you can't just wall off a space. You have to use the doors and windows that are provided at these locations, or otherwise you won't have any defenses. Other games with base building and defense like this, for example, like Project Zomboid and 7 Days to Die, also allow the player to completely build a base from scratch if they want. Or, if they prefer, they can adjust an existing structure to suit their needs. Now, Project Zomboid is a little more stringent, but 7 Days to Die allows the player the use of blocks to completely just build up and reshape things as they want. Survive the Nights doesn't really have that. I mean, sure, you're overlapping your defenses with what already exists on a structure, but you have to use what is there. You cannot, for example, build a door at the bottom of a staircase. The only thing you can really do is put a barricade there. And what's worse is that barricades and spikes is kind of where those defenses end. Really, all you can do is just slow zombies down. There's no turrets, there's no electric wires or barbed wire or anything like that. It's all just stuff to sort of alert you and light up zombies. I even found a motion sensor at one point. It made me think, well, maybe there are turrets in this game. But when I looked at the description for it, you can just attach it to an existing light structure so that it follows zombies around. And they make enough noise that, it's not really necessary anyways. So let's put the base building aside for a minute and talk about the survival and the exploration. The survival is decent. There's an interesting system where you have a certain amount of calories you need to eat each day. Now, if you fail to get that many calories, your general amount of health will decrease. And of course, if you don't keep yourself hydrated, the same thing will happen. Or if you take too much damage, or if your mental health decreases too much. Your mental health decreases when your character starts to panic, like when they fight zombies, or if they kill another player. On the other hand, if you manage to keep all of those meters in good shape, your general health will increase, and that means you get more health, you can carry more items, and the amount of damage you deal increases. There's not a whole lot more to it than that. You can scoop up water in canteens and boil them over a fire, or you can cook food you find to pop open cans, or increase the amount of calories you get out of it, but overall, it's not really all that hard to keep yourself fed and hydrated if you're paying attention. The exploration itself is actually pretty solid. The world is pretty, and it has this sort of veneer to it that makes it seem like everything has been abandoned for a really long time. There's creepers growing up the sides of houses, and there's these pathways that aren't marked on the map. It really encourages the player to want to go and explore and find out what's at these places. Unfortunately, you're gonna be seeing a lot of the same stuff over and over again, and that's not just because all of the assets are reused, it's just because the buildings all have the same interiors, and once you get inside these places, you realize they're abandoned, sure, but they look like they're abandoned in the way that like an old Target on the side of the road would be, instead of like a apocalyptic structure at the end of the world where everybody just had to leave in a hurry. It's like the company took everything, stripped the place from its signs and everything, and then just left. There's just not a whole lot in there. It doesn't feel interesting or threatening or even anxiety-inducing to enter these places. It's just like you're walking around an empty store with a bunch of zombies. And the zombies, ooh, the zombies. And it's not that the zombies have bad models or anything. There's a pretty solid variety to them. They're pretty scary looking, and they've got solid animations for the most part. It's just that not only are they kind of pushovers overall, but they're not particularly smart when it comes to pathfinding. A lot of them will walk straight into traps even when they could have avoided them rather easily, and other times if you enter a building, they'll break out through a window and then try and break back in through a closed door rather than climbing back in through the window they just smashed their way out of. There's also not really a whole lot of zombies. They're not especially dangerous by themselves, and there's not really any variety of different kinds of zombies. There's just zombies. There's no spitters or rudders or anything like that. Some of them are faster than others. Some of them limp or stagger instead of walking straight, but that's really about it. And I know that it's possible to change that in the settings for the servers, but I think probably just the base amount of zombies needs to be increased quite a bit, because even on the standard amount, there's just none of them. Unless you're inside of a building, you won't find zombies wandering around very much. Additionally, the combat is very weak. Not only are there not a whole lot of variety of melee weapons, but there's pretty much one thing you can do in melee combat, and that is swing. Both the left click and the right click are both swing. There's no power attack, there's no block, there's no dodge, and frankly, the amount of stamina it costs to swing a weapon is just so little that you could probably whack your way through a whole horde and not have a whole lot of trouble. The range combat's a bit different. There's a fair number of different attachments that you can find and put on weapons. You can pull oil filters out of cars and use them as suppressors, and the animations and the sounds for the guns are all really solid. Some of the reload are missing sound effects, and a few others are a little clunky, but frankly that's forgivable because it's early access still. But the melee combat definitely needs a rework of some kind. And another thing, the impact noise for the melee is good, but it's not wumpy enough. It's a little too realistic in the fact that it sounds like you're hitting something like 10 feet away from you, and there's just this sort of wet thunk, and there's absolutely no hit feedback if a zombie hits you. Overall, Survive the Nights has a lot of really cool concepts, and I really want to like the game. There's a lot of really cool things for you to do here, like you can pull apart different parts of cars, you can pull individual spark plugs out or the alternators and replace them in other cars, and you can even use some of those parts for other things, like the oil filter suppressors. But the thing is, it's just there's not enough substance here. The issue is really with quantity, not quality here. The game has a lot of really cool things to do, but just not enough for you to do. There's not enough here to keep players coming back and busy, and certainly multiplayer adds to that aspect a good bit. But even with multiplayer, unless you're constantly at war with each other, I don't think you're going to be playing this game a whole lot. Do I think the developers are going to fix those issues? I'm not really sure. The game certainly is in a lot better shape than the last time I checked it out, and the world itself has a lot more substance to it, but there's still a lot missing, and a lot of the issues are exactly the same, especially with the melee combat and the UI issues. But it's an early access title, all we can really do is wait and see. That's my opinions on this. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like. I'd really appreciate it. It would really help me out a lot. I'm the voice in your head. Thanks so much for listening to me today, and you'll be hearing from me again real soon.